Howdy neighbors, and welcome back to the Noy Mountain Music Teaching Channel. Today we are going to be looking at some infinity pattern backup. Yeah! It reminds me of a story when Bill Monroe was getting his picture taken one time, and the photographer said, "Bill, could you back up?" He said, "Oh, no, you back up." We're talking about infinity backup here today, and so if you're familiar with the infinity pattern, this is going to suit you well. So that video is right here if you haven't studied it. And you can check that out. It takes a little while to get underneath your fingers, but basically it is a major arpeggio starting from the third interval in the scale instead of the one, which is where it usually starts. So we're going to be using a couple of our favorite songs for learning, Blue Ridge Cabin Home and Your Love is Like a Flower, two very common chord forms. And so yeah, let's get right into it. So what we're doing is we're using the infinity pattern. This is the key of G, and we're going up from the major third, which is the 4th fret of the G, all the way up to the top of the infinity pattern, which is the 10th fret of the E. Then we're going to be coming down through C, through its high major extension of the arpeggio. If that sounds complicated, it is a little bit complicated, but here's what it sounds like. That might make more sense. Here we go. 1, 2, ready, go. That's our first move there. Okay, so we're looking at Blue Ridge Cabin Home, which is 1, 4, 5, G, C, and D. So after we do that, and you can find that in that infinity pattern video. So we're going up through G infinity. Remember to use your ring finger on the 10th fret of the A and the E. And then the last 16th note of that bar is going to be reaching out with your little finger to the 12th fret of the E with the upstroke, of course, and then starting your next bar, which is the C bar, on a downstroke, and we're going to come down through the C major arpeggio starting on its high major third, that's the 12th fret of the E. And after you play that downstroke, you'll move on your upstroke. Of course, this is the staggered technique. And you'll come down through your chord form. So it's really important to visualize your C chop chord there, the 3-finger chop chord, with your ring finger on the 10th fret of the D, first finger on the 7th fret of the A, and your middle finger on the 8th fret of the E. Okay, so we're starting with our little finger, using the stagger technique through the C major arpeggio. After we get done playing the 3-finger chop chord there, then we're going to drop back to our first finger on the 5th fret of the D with an upstroke and a downstroke, ring finger on the 9th fret of the G, and then up and a down on the C note, which is the 5th fret of the G. Alright, so starting from our downstroke, the high major third, the extension of the C chop chord. Okay, so since this is Blue Ridge Cabin Home, we got to get to the key of D, or the chord of D. Alright, so what we're going to do is we're going to come from the bottom of the chop chord, but when you're coming down through C, it can be advantageous to use your middle finger to root the bottom of the D chord, which is a little bit different than you might be used to. But when we're working with the system, we got to kind of be flexible, okay? So middle finger on the 7th fret of the G. This is going to come up through your D chop chord. Okay? So that's through your D arpeggio, 7th fret of the G, 4th fret of the D, 7th fret of the D, 5th fret of the A, 9th fret of the A, 5th fret of the E, and then we're going to end up on the 10th fret of the E, which is our D note. So 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E. Okay, so what we got so far is this. Come back to that 5th fret of the E there, which you heard. And then to get back into our infinity backwards, we're going to use the 7th fret of the E with our upstroke to finish out that D bar. This is a little bit confusing. Remember, starting with your middle finger here. That finishes out our D bar, and then we'll start infinity backwards in G from the 7th fret of the E. But before we do, please like and subscribe. And go ahead and hit that little bell there for the notifications, and you'll get all the good stuff from Noy Mountain Music. Thank you. And please consider becoming a patron on patreon.com/Noy Mountain Music. And that's going to finish out our G bar. So you can see I went back to the 7th fret of the G. It's a little bit complicated. And you could use the open G if you wanted to. And the final upstroke of that G bar on the 4th fret of the G before you start the whole thing over again. Okay, so this is our whole run. 5th fret of the D like I just did. But just make sure you get back to the 4th fret of the G for your upstroke before you start the whole thing over again. Something different on the back end if you like to, just flavor that to taste. You could do the same thing twice if you wanted to. This would all be perfectly transposable up to A. You know, if you start on the major third of A. Okay, so here's how it'd work in the key of G with the singing behind it. 1, 2, 3. Oh, I love those hills of old Virginia. From those blue ridge hills I did roam. When I die, won't you bury me in the mountains, far away near my Blue Ridge mountain home. To go into your break there. So if you're backing up the chorus, say, or the verse, you could do it something like that. All right, let's check out another chord form really quickly. Let's do Your Love's Like a Flower. So same basic premise for the first 2 chord changes, up through infinity and G. But instead of going right to the D, of course, we go back to G. So you're just going to slide your first finger back to the 4th fret and do G again. Now when we're coming down through D, here's another little move. And use the flat 7 in D, which is the 8th fret of the E, that's a C note, and come down through the arpeggio with that note in it. Okay, so calling that out, 8th fret of the E, down to the 5th fret of the E. All right, 9th fret of the A, 5th fret of the A, and then we're going to slide that back to the 3rd fret, that's a little key. And then you'll be able to visualize the bottom of your D chop chord, 7th fret of the D, 4th fret of the D, and then the root, which is your D note, 7th fret of the G. All right? You could have the upstroke there, or you could have it on the 5th fret of the G, coming back to the 4th fret, which is where it starts over. That's kind of nice. Kind of tough to do technically, but then from there you can just rinse and repeat. Now here we have the opportunity to have a split bar, so you can split the infinity like this, something like that. Flavor that to taste, but what it is the first 2 beats of infinity and G, but you're going to drop to the open D, like you like to do for the last 16th note of that beat, and do that same thing for D, shifted down 1 set of strings. But instead of dropping to the open, you're going to drop back to the 5th fret of the A for your last upstroke 16th note of that beat. So it's going to be 1 E and a 2 E and a. Don't forget the it's the open D. 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a. And then just some little tag for the G. 1 E and a 2 E and 3. Something like that. Whatever you like that. 1 E and a 2 E and a 3. Alright, so the whole ride with the singing behind it would be something like this. 1, 2, 3. Oh, they tell me your love's like a flower. In the springtime blossom so fair. In the fall when it withers away, dear. And they tell me that's the way of your love. Something like that. That's a little infinity style backup. Again, you can transpose that from G to A. You can even get up there to B. but it doesn't work so well in this particular format on keys that are higher than that. But you could rewire it and figure out how to do it. All right, so hope you enjoyed this little infinity backup lesson. And it's much more advanced than the backup we taught on the first backup, which was just kind of like, you know, that kind of tremolo style with a leading flat 7 to the 4 chord and all that. So if you like the video, please like the video and maybe subscribe to the channel. You can think about supporting the channel if you like to go to patreon.com/NeueMountainMusic. We certainly appreciate all the good neighbors who have been helping out there and helping us make these videos for you every week. We love to share the music. So we will catch you on the next one, neighbors. Adios.